In this video, we're going to explore 7 different ways you can harmonize a melody, and the varying degrees to which harmony can have an effect on a melody. Since this is purely a demonstration of harmony, I won't be altering the melody at all, changing the groove, tempo, or time signature, or using any other compositional techniques. This is simply showing how powerful harmony can be when changed underneath a static melody. We will be using a simple melody from the Lutheran hymnal called "You Satisfy the Hungry Heart." I chose this melody for a few reasons. It is a melody often sung in unison by a congregation, so it has to be singable by most people. It has a nice melodic contour, but is also simple enough to the point where the harmony can be changed quite drastically without too much trouble. If the melody was too complex, you may have fewer options when it comes to making harmonic choices. This melody, however, is diatonic, meaning it doesn't meander outside the key center. It is rhythmically straightforward and simple, using only eighth, quarter, dotted quarter, and half notes, and uses stepwise motion and singable intervals, like thirds, fourths, and sixths. The Level 1 harmonization is a vanilla 4-part hymn texture. You would likely find a harmonization like this in a church hymnal or in a simple SATB arrangement. Thus, I have arranged it primarily following the rules of the common practice 4-part writing tradition. For the sake of simplicity, we are only going to use diatonic triads in this example, which are the chords that exist naturally within the key. We'll mostly hear the 1, 4, and 5 chords, with a brief appearance by the 3 and the 6 chord. Although many of the chords are in root position, we occasionally use their respective inversions in order to create smooth, singable melodies for all parts. Let's take a listen.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Level 2 introduces some simple techniques that can add a lot of color, including secondary dominants and 7th chords. Secondary dominants are basically just 5/7 chords, but for the other major and minor chords in the key. For example, the 2 chord in D major is E minor, and the 5 of E minor is a B major chord. Thus, the 5/7 of 2 in D major is a B7 chord. 7th chords simply tack on one extra note to the already existing triad in the 1-3-5 pattern we use to build triads. For example, a D major 7 chord would have the notes D, F sharp, A, and C sharp. We also hear more moving parts to create more motion, as well as a few suspensions, which are notes in a chord that create dissonance and resolve to a consonance. We'll continue to utilize inversions and smooth voice leading principles as well. Let's listen.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Okay, D major is good fun, but let's mess with the tonality a little bit. We will now harmonize the melody according to the relative minor of our home key of D major, which is B minor. We will continue to take extra advantage of inversions and smooth voice leading principles, as we're going for more of a Baroque style a la J.S. Bach, who was really the master of moving parts to add and release tension. We'll also hear from our good friend the deceptive cadence for the first time, which occurs when a 5 chord takes us somewhere other than the 1 chord. We'll also use tonicization throughout to appear as if we're meandering throughout neighboring keys. Away we go.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Level 4 incorporates a technique called triad over bass. Still in 4 parts, the bass voice moves freely, while the top 3 voices move together in triads. The bass voice is essentially free to land on any note that creates a nice sound, whether it be diatonic or not. This is a simple yet exciting way to create new and interesting sounds or voicings without adding more voices. You may hear some interesting sounds in this example, such as the major 7 sharp 5 chord and the dominant 9 sus 4 chord.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
At level 5, we can now introduce Divisi, where our standard 4 parts split into more parts to create more rich, contemporary voicings. I like to think of these as feel-good chords. Smooth voice leading and resolutions are still encouraged, while being more rich and harmonically interesting. This is what you may find in a modern choral or vocal jazz arrangement, more suited for an intermediate to advanced group of vocalists. In this example, you'll hear some of my favorite techniques like chord substitutions, extensions, and modal interchange. Remember when we talked about 7th chords? Well, it turns out it doesn't stop there. You can add 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths to chords as well, creating super rich voicings that make you feel warm and fuzzy, especially when you sing them. Chord substitutions allow us to place these feel-good chords basically wherever we want, using the melody as our guide for which chords sound good and where they best fit. Modal interchange, or mode mix, simply allows us to borrow chords from different modes of our tonic pitch. Right now we're in D major or D Ionian, but we could borrow some chords from, say, D minor or D Aeolian. Don't worry about all the fancy names though, we're just here to have fun and hear some good chords. Let's harmonize.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Level 6 takes level 5 techniques even further, while also introducing tritone substitutions and altered chords. A tritone substitution is where we substitute the 5 chord of any given target chord with a dominant 7th chord a tritone away from it. Say we are headed to G. Instead of using a D7 chord, we can use an A flat 7 chord instead. This makes cadences much more interesting. We also introduce altered voicings, which alter our already present extensions in our chords. For example, instead of having an A13 chord, you could have an A13 flat 9 flat 5 chord. What's exciting about these techniques is that it is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many possibilities the more you explore these techniques. Let's hear how they sound.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Level 7 introduces some pretty wild chords that create a texture described as polytonal. We've now reached the point where functional harmony has been abandoned, instead opting for a series of polychords that are largely unrelated to one another, such as D major over B major, or F sharp minor over G minor. This isn't really performable by most singing groups, nor are these techniques used by most arrangers. This is simply where it gets goofy and almost chaotic, reaching a point of diminishing return where the harmony can no longer be distinguished from other harmony in its class. Nonetheless, it's quite fun and humorous to see how far you can push a simple melody. In fact, just to prove my point, I'll use a random string of numbers to determine what the bass notes are and build the harmony from there. I hope you get a good chuckle out of this.
You satisfy the hungry heart with gifts of finest wheat. Come give to us, O saving Lord, the bread of life to eat.
Hooray, you've made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe and comment which example was your favorite. I'll also have the PDF of all the examples for download in the description of the video. Thanks for watching.